So we can't thank you enough for braving the weather and coming out tonight to our State of the District address. And this one is different from the others that we've conducted. So you had a lot of great things going on, and usually we would take an hour and a half to talk about that. But today we have another topic that is so important to not only the schools but the community at large, that we wanted to spend the majority of the time talking about that and then following up with your opportunity to ask questions. So tonight we dedicate this State of the District address to the fiscal matters of the district as well as our potential new development here in the city. So to that end, I would like to lay out some of the ground rules for tonight, because I would not stand here and speak as if I were an authority on economic development, nor a financial expert around school funding. What I do stand here as is as the superintendent of a school district, having been here 6 years, having a clear understanding of how education is impacted at several levels, from the local level, state level, all the way to the national level. That I will speak clearly about. So to that end, we have invited someone who is an expert in school funding as well as economic development to the degree that it impacts and affects school districts. Some of you may remember this person because he actually did a lot of work back in 2017 with our city and our district as we were contemplating the building of our new building. The first thing I want to do, because David is not a neighbor of this area, I would like to go over the Bell Oaks Richmond Mall project, and then David will come and talk about economic development in generalities. So the Bell Oaks at Richmond project. While Mrs. Howard is pulling up my little 3 slides, I would first of all like to say, I think everyone, if you're a resident here, you've already received the postcard in the mail from the developer. So what we would like to do, for those that may not have received it, should have received it today, yesterday. I mean, some people even called and said they got it on Monday. The Bell Oaks card was sent out by the developer, and what I would like to do is just run through that to make sure, first of all, we're all on the same page with regards to what the project is. And this is the first side of the postcard that was sent out. And as you can see, it basically lists the amenities. It lists that it's a 69-acre mixed-use development coming to Richmond Heights this spring. It has been called or named Bell Oaks at Richmond, and there's a mock picture of what one of the buildings would look like. So that was the front side of the card. Raise your hand if you received the card, the postcard. Okay. Raise your hand if you have not received the card. Okay, so those that have not, you might want to be on the lookout tomorrow or Saturday. So the back side of the postcard looks like this. What Bell Oaks will bring to the community. There are sections. First of all, the benefits to the community, the benefits to the city residents, the benefits to the city operating revenues, but I've highlighted the part that affects me directly and this school district is where it says the benefits to the school districts, Richmond Heights and South Euclid-Lyndhurst. And underneath that section, there are 4 bullets. Number 1, current property tax valuations are locked in for 30 years with 0 loss of tax revenue. Number 2, additional revenue to schools through income tax benefit. Number 3, Bell Oaks is a community partner supporting the schools via sponsorship of various events, clubs, and activities. And finally, city and school districts to receive approximately $907,000 from current delinquent mall property taxes. Well, that sounds good. And let me be the first to say, I support economic development. I support progress. I even support Bell Oaks, but not to the detriment of students and school districts. So just as we've heard the State of the Union address the other night, there's always fact-checking that must occur. And in order to do fact-checking, we must understand the project in its totality. Because I saw someone lean over and ask a question, why do they even mention the South Euclid-Lyndhurst School District? Because everyone in this room does not understand exactly what that meant. So let me be clear on what that means. This is a rendition of what the new project will look like as it replaces the current Richmond Mall, or Richmond Town Square. Now, what you see is a map that has several buildings, but you also see a thick red line. The thick red line encloses the area that is the part of Richmond Mall or Bell Oaks that belongs to the Richmond Heights local school district in terms of the property taxes that are paid. Everything to the right of the red line represents the mall, Bell Oaks, Town Square, where property taxes are paid to the South Euclid-Lyndhurst School District. I've had people ask, how does that happen? Isn't the whole mall in the city of Richmond Heights? It absolutely is. However, an agreement many years ago somehow has the school district's boundaries cutting right through the mall. Now, what I've learned over the 6 years that I've been here is that the area that reports or pays its taxes to the Richmond Heights schools is primarily the Sears parcel. So to give you bearing, here's Richmond Road, and here's Wilson Mills, and down here at Monticello. That's Walgreens, there on the corner, Cube Smart, and then the newly proposed area with the Regal Cinema stand. So once again, what's outlined in red is primarily the Sears side, and that is the only part of that development that would pay property taxes to the Richmond Heights schools. Everything else infers its development toward South Euclid. So, my interest is in the red lines. Let's walk through the red lines. Coming down Richmond Road, we're right here. We're coming down, here's the church. At the entryway, you come into a nice development and you have buildings 1 and 2. Building 1 is currently slated, as stated on the website, to be a building that will contain 36 residential apartments, and on the ground floor right here, approximately 8,000 square feet of retail. Building 2, right across from it, is slated to have 84 apartments and approximately 8,000 square feet of retail. Now, because I'm currently engrossed in a building project, square feet have become real to me. And I always try to gauge what square footage is. So 8,000 square feet to someone that's not used to building sounds like a lot, and it is, depending on what you're doing with it. So our current Richmond Heights Library, which actually is up here in the corner on the strip, is 4,000 square feet approximately. And the reason I know that is because we're relocating that library into the new 21st Century Community Building. And we're actually adding 1,000 square feet to accommodate our senior citizens with the Silver Sneakers program. So that alone is 5,000 square feet. So the corner of our new building is 5,000 square feet. So therefore, take the library and add 2,000 feet, and you have 8,000 here and 8,000 here. Building 3 is slated to have 97 residential units, no retail. Building 4 is slated to have 74 residential units, no retail. Building 5 is slated to have 42 residential units, no retail. Building 6 is slated to have 42 residential units, no retail. Building 7 and 8, which are actually in the second phase of the project, but yet still within our catchment area, are slated to have 39 apartments each, no retail. So as far as the Richmond Heights local schools, we are looking at 453 apartments and approximately 16,000 square feet of storefront, with the possibility of these parcels here becoming something retail or hotel, but at this current time, nothing was mentioned on the website about that. 453 units. Several of those, approximately, over 100, I can't remember the exact number that we were told, but over 100 will have 2 bedrooms or the ability to have an extra bedroom. So 2 bedrooms, yeah. Now, just for the sake of knowing what's happening over here on the South Euclid-Lyndhurst side, Building 9 and 10, and I actually can't see the numbers, but it's these buildings here somewhere. Building 9, 42 residential units. Building 10, 42 residential units. Building 16, 64 residential units. Building 17, 66 units. 18 has 57 units. 19 has 70 units. Building 20 has 75 units. Buildings 21 and 22. Now we get to commercial, retail. Buildings 21 and 22 will have multi-tenant commercial, retail, or restaurant. Buildings 23 and 24 will have multi-tenant commercial and restaurant. Building 25, multi-tenant commercial, fitness, and retail and restaurant. And buildings 27 through 32, single-story multi-tenant commercial. So just from that description alone, it is obvious that while the South Euclid-Lyndhurst side does add up to 416 apartment or residential units, that's where all of the commercial and retail lies, with the exception of the 8,000, approximately 8,000 here and 8,000 square feet here. So when you think about residential, you think about people, you think about working people making income taxes, and possibly people with children that may impact our schools. When you think about commercial, you think about property taxes as well as income taxes, but again, 416 apartments. So having set that stage with a clear understanding that, one, the Regal Cinema stays with a major renovation, Cube Smart stays, which is also under the ownership of the current developers. A grocery store, I believe the Walmart stays, Planet Fitness relocates, and some other boutique possibly, but retail and commercial. So with that being our backdrop and context, as the superintendent of the Richmond Heights schools, I'm concerned about that red area and the impact that those 453 or 472, it's over 450 apartments, may or may not have as an impact to, one, us as a school district, but two, you as a taxpayer for a school district with a project that splits 2 school districts. So to that end, I would like to lay out some of the ground rules for tonight, because I would not stand here and speak as if I were an authority on economic development, nor a financial expert around school funding. What I do stand here as is as the superintendent of a school district, having been here 6 years, having a clear understanding of how education is impacted at several levels, from the local level, state level, all the way to the national level. That I will speak clearly about. So to that end, we have invited someone who is an expert in school funding, as well as economic development to the degree that it impacts and has Some of you may remember this person because he actually did a lot of work back in 2017 with our city and our district as we were contemplating the building of our new building. So to that end, I would like to introduce Mr. David Conley, but I must let you know that David Conley is from Columbus, Ohio. And he braved the weather, and I didn't even tell him it was breakfast because I thought he might chicken out and not come, but he drove all the way from Columbus. David Conley has come to us free of charge. David Conley is not in the business of developing or building or running schools, but what he clearly understands is economics. He clearly understands how schools are funded and what they need to succeed, and he also understands the cycles of cities. David's resume is extensive, and he'll speak a little bit about all of the projects throughout the entire state that he's currently working on or has worked on in the past. So what we would like to do in terms of your engagement with Mr. Conley is that you will notice on your table there are index cards. There are also golf pencils. As he's speaking, we would ask that if a question arises in your mind, if you would jot that question down. And Mrs. Marnisha Brown, our assistant superintendent, and Mrs. Elizabeth Boyd, our elementary principal, and Mrs. Letitia Davies, our special ed director, as well as Mrs. Tucker, our director of ed services, will be circulating around the perimeter to collect those cards, so that once Mr. Conley is finished with his presentation, we will then facilitate a Q&A by the reading of the questions on the card. I have promised him that I rearrange the order by which we will handle things tonight so that he can leave and get back on the road to Columbus. That would be the least I could do as a person. So without further ado, I introduce to you Mr. David Conley, President and CEO of Rockville Finance.
Yeah, I can tell you, just based on the presentation I saw here, it's exciting. It's really exciting. If you're a resident here, you can't help but be excited about the changes that are starting to happen. We talked about, how many of you have been in at least one meeting that I presented in? Quite a few of you. You guys remember one of my very first meetings, and I talked about having a vision. You know, the difficulty of moving from place to place without having a vision of where you're going in the future. And that a lack of vision has killed a lot of communities around the state. And it was at that meeting when I talked to you guys about vision, I talked to you about a commitment to this town, to do the things that in some communities are hard to do, to make a commitment to support the schools, to make a commitment to support the city, to do the kinds of things that would move this city forward, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term, and to do it for your families and your children and your grandchildren. So this particular development that's being talked about tonight, the construction of the schools, all these things taken together are a reflection of that commitment that you all have made, that investment that you've been making to change the future for Richmond Heights. So right now, this is a wonderful, great news story. But you all know me well too, and that is, I'm a huge fan of education and making sure that as you invest in the future of this city, that you understand what that investment is all about and how it works, so that you can make informed decisions and you can understand how those investments turn into reality for you as we go down the road. So today I'm going to talk about that. All right, so as a quick introduction, simply I'm a specialist in governmental finance in Ohio and taxation. So over the years I've been working with communities to look at and develop what one would call financial sustainability and affordability. And the two things are really critical and important for communities that are at a crossroads, much like Richmond Heights. And the question is, how do we remain a vibrant city for the future, but also remain affordable for the future? Because hand in hand, you can't be sustainable unless people can afford to live here. And so that's one of the things I work with communities. The second is life cycle measurement in terms of helping a community figure out where they are in their life cycle. And are they at the beginning, the middle, or the end? And then what do they need to do to get back to the beginning again? And then develop along the way tax strategy and policy development so that when you implement certain types of taxes, understanding who those taxes are going to impact and whether or not that form of tax strategy is something that can be sustained as you go down the road. So when you talk about types of abatements, are those abatements beneficial not only today but for the future? I've been around for a while. I started in 1989. I've worked with about 400, well, more than 400 now, 400 plus communities. And I'm a registered municipal advisor and a municipal advisor principal. Life cycles. So I had another graphic that I thought at first was kind of funny, then I said, it's kind of morbid, because it showed like a baby at the very beginning and then someone laying in a casket at the very end. I'm like, that's not a good idea. So let's start with the basic life cycle. Every business, every human, every government has a cycle to its life. Every one of them. But the cycles are different for different communities at different times and for different people at different times. And for different businesses at different times. Different things will happen to create a startup or a rebirth that will send you on your way to growth and ultimately to maturity, and then you start to decline. When I came here 4 or 5 years ago, there were very, very clear implications that Richmond Heights was moving past its point of maturity. It was reaching a point where it appeared that we were experiencing what I call contraction. We were losing taxpayers. The new taxpayers that were coming in were fewer than the ones that were leaving. And as the newer ones came in, they had lower incomes than those that were leaving, causing a compression in income tax receipts to the city, which is accelerating the need for economic development. Likewise, the same thing happened when it came to property values in the school district. As incomes slowly started to erode, so did home values. And as home values started to decline, so did the tax revenues to the school district. So at the very same time, a change in demographics or a move past maturity started to create a compression or contraction of the people that were here to support the infrastructure. And on a forward-looking basis, didn't appear to be sustainable. So in other words, following that same trajectory would have left this city with fewer taxpayers, with more needs in the infrastructure, in schools that were in bad condition. And that was the first time I met with you all, and I talked about you could continue down the road of the decline, or you could make a decision to invest in this community as a whole. And you did. We started with the school district's bond issue and the operating levy. We start to see one of the very first signs of that commitment come out of the ground then. And now with this development project, we see yet another commitment to move away from decline and bring ourselves back around to a beginning or a rebirth as we go forward. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see in action. So let's talk about how you actually become reborn. What revitalizes a community? The first is that a community has to always be attractive and provide opportunities to bring residents in with relatively decent financial means. And it's not to say that we don't want anyone in the community, but it's more difficult to be sustainable long-term if incomes are declining as opposed to increasing. Type of businesses that will provide jobs that are sustainable, that are long-term, that provide benefits, that provide a decent working wage, so that not only can people that work in those businesses can live in the community and continue to contribute to the community, but can buy property as well. So how do you do that? What are the things that are important? I put that under the quality of life heading. What in fact is quality of life? And it's different for different people, but in no specific order, typically people look at the condition of the schools as a first indicator of quality of life. Are the schools good? Now I'll leave it to you to decide how to define the word good. But good schools are typically the first. The second is some degree of safety that people can feel is reliable, that they can trust in, and that they feel comfortable with their families being around. So police and fire protection usually are at the top of the list. But access to health care is also one of the key features to safety. Transportation. What are the quality of the roads? are you dodging potholes all day long? Are lines broken down? Is there ample parking for some communities? I don't know that that's a problem in this community in particular. But transportation and access to jobs via transportation. So is there a bus system or some type of rail system? Reliable utilities. Now, I used to live in a community where the power would go out 3 times a week, and it was just really frustrating. But having the ability to have utilities that when you turn the water on, the water works, flush the toilet, things disappear, it's nice to have. And then other amenities. These are the things that are kind of on the fringe that change the dynamics of a community and make it more attractive or less attractive to people that don't live here but might consider living here, such as the quality of the parks that you would offer, access to shopping and the type of shopping that you would have, as well as entertainment. And so it's those kinds of things that this particular development project add to build the entire fabric of what this community could be in the future. It isn't answering all the other things, but it's a key component to it. So as we begin to really analyze the benefits of something like this, it fits. It's an absolute necessity that you create the amenities that make this a town attractive for future residents and to bring, hopefully, future businesses to the area. So that's really key. So let's talk about economic development in the big picture. Usually in the United States, communities are competing to attract developers and businesses to their towns. So it's a very aggressive competition that occurs. The number of businesses and developers that are in the United States is limited. The number of successful developers and businesses in the United States is limited. And they're each looking for the opportunity to expand their business where it is most advantageous for them to expand their business. So the opportunity to get this particular development here is somewhat rare because it's a highly competitive environment and the developer chose to come here. So let's talk about why cities, for example. Now, what you all may or may not know is that one of the main reasons that development is attractive to a state or to a city or to a school is that there's a financial benefit, hopefully, to the governments that are involved in the transaction. For example, cities are very interested in the creation of new income taxes. And as most of you know that were in my financial class, cities rely on income taxes as their primary source of income to operate. So whenever there's an opportunity to create economic development, they typically go after things that would create new jobs, which would then in turn create new income taxes and possibly even increase the number of residents that live in the city. Counties are driven by an interest in sales taxes, not so much in income taxes. Counties' largest revenue stream comes from a sales tax. So they would be most focused on retail opportunities, the opportunities to create new businesses where those businesses are making sales and then charging a sales tax, which would flow to the county. The state of Ohio is interested in income taxes, sales taxes. And how many business owners do we have in here? There's a tax called a commercial activity tax that was basically put in place to replace the old personal property tangible tax. So the state of Ohio has interests in those taxes as well. School districts, however, are generally focused on property taxes because property taxes for all school districts in Ohio are their #1 source of funding. So they are very interested in seeing some form of property tax receipt because generally they don't benefit from any of the above taxes. Even though school districts have the ability to have an income tax, the majority of districts in the state do not have an income tax. The most common tool used to incentivize a business or a developer to come to a community is to give them a break on property taxes. Most common, not always the sole way, there are other ways to do it, but the most common practice is to use property taxes. So said another way, if a business is interested in developing in an area, they can be offered an opportunity to bring their business to town, but not have to pay property taxes on the value of whatever it is they construct in the area of development. As a result, simply because school districts generally rely on property taxes, districts often receive the least benefit from a new development. And that's not just Richmond Heights. This is every school district in the state of Ohio. There are certain other things that either make this more or less true, but in general, school districts tend to have the least benefit from an economic development project. But we'll talk about some details. I want to go to the next slide, and I want to specifically talk about the Richmond Heights situation, but in generalities. One thing that's really important to understand is that the things that Dr. Willis just spoke about, this project in particular isn't guaranteed. So as of today, there is no guarantee that that project will ever be constructed. We hope that it will be constructed, but there's no guarantee that it will be. There's also no guarantee that whoever the current developer is actually the developer that will do the project. Recessions come and go, companies come and go, ownership changes hands from time to time. So it's important for me to make sure you understand that as I talk about this, I'm talking about this as though it would be any development, not just this particular development. And it could be happening at any time, not at this specific point in time. Because this project could stop today and not resurface again for 5 years. But in 5 years, the same rules, unless they're changing rules, would generally apply. So what I'm hoping you take away is that this is a lesson not just for this particular project, but for the circumstances. And it's an important thing to understand. In general, a project that's valued at $100 million and receives a property tax abatement, that particular abatement on a $100 million project in the Richmond Heights School District is worth about $2,350,000 a year to the business that would be coming into the school district. So that $2,350,000 is viewed by the business as the incentive to do something within that school district. That type of incentive is not rare, it's not uncommon. The business is not being treated special or different. It is what the norm is to incentivize a company to locate to a particular community. In a normal CRA type of tax abatement, the type of tax abatement that would benefit a company in this particular case, the entire property tax that would be paid to the school district, the $2,350,000, is no longer paid to the school district, or wouldn't be paid to the school district. So the school district itself will not receive, under this type of a structure, any property taxes above and beyond what they're currently receiving. So the district basically has a zero gain on property taxes, back to the previous page, because property taxes are what's used as the carrot to bring businesses into the school district. And unfortunately, school districts rely on property taxes. In addition to that type of a concept, when you look at development, and there's a lot of different types of developments that happen. Some developments are strictly commercial, where you have like an Amazon distribution center. Some developments are mixed use, where you have apartment buildings, and you'll have retail shops, Starbucks and things of that nature. You can have industrial type of developments that come along. So each development in and of itself brings with it a different type of impact on a community. Some developments are very demanding on the infrastructure of a community. So if there's a lot of car traffic, a lot of people, for example, when you have more people, like in an apartment complex, you typically have higher fire and police costs because you have a concentration of people in a particular area. When you have a distribution center like an Amazon, for example, you don't have as much of a concentration on police and fire, but you might have more demands on water and wastewater. So all of those things are impacted by the different types of development that would come to a community. In a development that contains housing, one of the infrastructure impacts, in addition to police and fire and roads, would be children. Typically, if you have a household, there's one or two kiddos that are resident in that household, and those kids have the opportunity to go to the public school that serves the area where that development is located. If you have a development with, let's say, 372 housing units, and I just said, let's take roughly half of that number, say 0.5 kids per household, what you would end up with in a school district, and I want to take a second to explain this, in a school district like Richmond Heights would be an increased cost to operate at Richmond Heights schools to serve those children. So in this case, I have $1 million number, and you're probably wondering, why is it $1 million to serve 186 students in Richmond Heights? Are you guys familiar with the term ed choice? Okay. It's a flawed concept of funding, of creating an opportunity for students that would like to pursue a private education outside of the public schools and to receive a scholarship from the school district, the public school district that they're entitled to attend, to help them pay for the cost of that private education outside of the school system. A school system, a public school system that is subject to that formula has to be deemed a ed choice district. So if you would, imagine yourself moving to Richmond Heights today, not the Richmond Heights of 25 years from now, which will be different, much different, much better, but today. And you move into a very nice facility, nice apartment building, and you make a decent wage, a fairly decent wage, and you have a child or two. You have a choice of either sending them, yes, sir?
You speak into the mic, it's no hard hearing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Was anyone else? I can start over. I don't mind. I have nowhere to go. What was the last thing that you heard? Did you hear me ask about ed choice? Okay. So imagine yourself being a resident in a new apartment building, and you have a choice of sending your child to Richmond Heights schools, in particularly this school building. Have you guys walked through this school building? You should. Particularly this school building. Or you can take a check from the school district for $5,500 and go shopping for a private education. Which of the two choices do you think they would make? Yeah. You guys know me, right? I keep it real. I love you. That's why I keep it real. They're going to leave. I would. Not in this building, if I can take $5,500 for Dr. Willis. So you take that and multiply it times 186 kids, and the school district's writing a check on an annual basis for $1 million. Now these are speculative. I have no idea how many kids are going to live here. But it's going to cost some money. So outside of the property taxes that the school district will not receive, the city will receive an increase in income taxes, we hope. Whether it's this development or any future developments, and that's the goal of really generating economic activity, is to bring income taxes into this city. In a case where a development is overlapping several communities, such as South Euclid-Lyndhurst schools and the Richmond Heights schools in the city, some discussions would likely have to take place regarding how do you share those income taxes as they come in. So let's assume income taxes are around $500,000. If they do get shared three ways, Richmond Heights would receive around $166,000. So what happens is that we create, and it's possible that it could be created through no one's intent, and I want to be very clear about this. The developers aren't intending to create an imbalance. The city isn't intending to create an imbalance, but one can exist simply by the nature of what's happening. So when there's an imbalance or a shortfall, the school district has to make up that shortfall. How many of you care to guess what that takes? What's required to make up a shortfall when you don't have enough money to operate? Right. So through no one's direct effort or intent, you could find yourself faced with an additional operating levy or an increased operating levy because of an planned imbalance that could occur. I want to be perfectly clear about this. This does not happen in every development case. Richmond Heights has unique circumstances that are creating this situation, or could create this situation, both now or in the future. The first is the type and location of development. In this particular case, you've got a development that some of the development is residential and brings with it children. If it was a different type of development, this might be a different story. The fact that the school district is ed choice. If the school district were not ed choice, then we would be looking at a different financial circumstance going forward. And the third is the type of tax incentive being used. In this case, it's a property tax incentive. And when you combine those together, and again, a property tax incentive is not a bad thing. It's good. And it's nice to have the tool to use it. But when you combine it with the other circumstances, it makes it a bit challenging. So what is the solution? Without a doubt for Richmond Heights, this project in particular is great news. And continued economic development is a win for everyone here, because we are moving from a decline to a rebirth. And it paints the opportunity for a bright future for the city and for the school district. But these unique characteristics about the school district situation should be really analyzed in detail by all the parties involved to really understand the triggers of what could unintentionally end up requiring a higher tax on the school district side of the ledger, which, by the way, most of the city's taxpayers are also the school district's taxpayers. So you're one and the same, and everyone has the same goal for the community. Ultimately, some type of well-thought-out agreement that would allow for the district to manage any unexpected expenses as a result of the students should be worked out. And I think that is a very possible outcome. And at the end of the day, frankly, I see a beautiful Richmond Heights in the future, and we're off to a great start from what I can tell. So I'm excited to have an opportunity to kind of explain that to you, and would love the opportunity to answer some questions later on today. So, Dr. Willis?
Having heard that synopsis of possibilities, I'm hoping that people were writing their questions, and I do see my staff circulating, and if you could bring those up. David talked about unique situations and circumstances here with our school district, and that's where I speak as the expert. Every district is unique. Every city is unique. So let me just share with you a little bit about our story from the financial end. But before I talk about the financial end, I'm going to start with the accountability end, that state report card, because it is the state report card and its measurements that have kicked in the category of ed choice. It's ed choice that allows students and families to take checks from our school district, so to speak, and go to private and parochial schools, thus further depleting our resources for our students. So I've made an illustration once before as I testified before the 133rd General Assembly Subcommittee, that as a superintendent of a district that's been labeled ed choice, I feel like I have a gun stuck to the side of me here saying improve, improve, improve. But then I feel like I have a knife stuck in this side of me and I'm hemorrhaging blood, the resources needed to improve, improve, improve. So with that said, let me give you one example of our flawed accountability system with our state report card. And this one example is what puts our high school in the ed choice category. And by the way, David's example of the $5,500 was an average. For those that don't know, high school vouchers are $6,000, and elementary, which is K-8, those vouchers are $4,650. So here's the high school example, and Ms. Brown, you can bring those up because whatever you have, we'll address them. Here's the example of the graduation rate. Our district has a D. I then turn and say, but every senior graduated. Then you look at me and say, how is that possible? Graduation rate is not determined based on how many seniors graduate. Graduation rates are based on 4-year cohorts. So let me give you the exact numbers and the succinct story of this past graduation cohort and what equated to a D. We started, okay, so let me finish this, then I'll have you in. So we started 4 years ago with a cohort of 70 students. And over the course of 4 years, some students left, they exited our cohort. Some students came, they entered the cohort. But when it was time to determine the report card grade, 70 was the number that was determined to be 4 years ago. In this past graduating class, 57 students graduated. 57 students started that school year, so all 100%, they graduated, but 70 started 4 years ago. So I had my team data dive into the state's portal, and I wanted to know what happened to those other 13 students. First of all, 57 out of 70 is 81%. That is a D in terms of graduation rate. 13 students didn't graduate, and here they are. And the board has seen the presentation, they've seen the kids' pictures, they've seen their stories. I won't talk specifically about students, but I'll tell you their stories. 6 of those students actually still walk our halls. They are still in our school district because they are entitled to be there based on federal law that says they're special needs, and they have an IEP that says they can stay in public schools until they're 21. That's a federal law called IDEA. However, we have to be held accountable to a state law that says if students don't graduate in 4 years, they are non-graduate. So they've counted as a dropout, but they're still here and they're going to be here a few more years. Then we have 3 students that have come to our community during their junior and senior year to live with grandparents via what the state calls a grandparent affidavit. And some of you grandparents are here, so we get it. Trying to help your children who may be struggling themselves. But we had 3 of those students not succeed and did not make it out in 4 years. But they came to us as juniors and seniors. So that's 9 of the students. Then we had a couple of students that actually were placed here in foster homes. You may know foster parents, and they're great people. You may be a foster parent. I salute you. But unfortunately, the child that you take custody of or agree to serve may have trouble adjusting. They may not make it, and we had a couple of those that didn't make it. Again, transferring into our district their junior and senior year. 2 students do that and join the Job Corps. Noble, at the time when they were doing that with their parents, they were going to sign out, we're going to join the Job Corps, and they're going to get their life started. Well, unfortunately for me, they're non-graduates equal to a dropout, but they're doing phenomenally well. I stand here and tell you that none of the 13 students that were non-graduates started in our school district their 9th grade year. None of them. With the exception of one, we had one severely disabled student, but he was also counted as a non-graduate, but severely disabled. So 12 of the 13 transferred into that cohort that has labeled our high school a D with an 81% 4-year cohort rate, thus causing it to be eligible for Ed Choice at the high school, thus causing vouchers of $6,000 to now be taken not only by students that have attended our schools and made a conscious choice that they don't want to be here, but by any resident in the city who may have always sent their child to private school or parochial school simply because that's their family value. That is the current legislation that's being battled today as we speak in Columbus. If you haven't been paying attention, You may know that, or may not know, that the deadline was January 31st. They couldn't come to an agreement. Our legislators couldn't. So they pushed it out 60 days to April 1st. Then private schools filed a lawsuit with the Supreme Court. Now our legislators are back at the table. The House passed a resolution today. The Senate rejected it. It now goes to a subcommittee. The Supreme Court case is still dangling. In the meantime, the sun goes down and it comes up tomorrow, and we've got a budget to try to figure out. We've got teachers that have contracts that need to know if they're going to have a job or not, and the cycle continues. So I wanted to be clear about that accountability piece that has kicked in the whole ed choice piece. So by the way, South Euclid is also an ed choice, so it affects them in the same way. So to that point, because there are a few other unique situations that clearly lie around the state's unconstitutional funding that I will address. But in an effort to get David on the road, Ms. Brown has collected questions, and I'll just ask that she read them.
Question number 1. The card, and I'm assuming it's this card, the card said that schools will receive over $900,000 from delinquent mall property taxes. How is that not beneficial to our school district?
Okay, good tag team. So, yeah, the card, it did say that. And what I will say is recall the picture where I outlined the mall in its totality. Sears is the only portion of that mall that pays its taxes to us. Sears has already been purchased. Sears has already, whatever delinquencies have already been wrapped up. So whatever that $907,000 is, perhaps that's what's going to happen when the developer buys the rest of the mall, because we're only concerned in Richmond Heights schools about what happened with Sears, and it was sold for $1.6 million. So that, and that's it. Anything else I need to add to that? Okay, all right.
This is a 2-part question. Is abatement a done deal? It appears as though the Richmond Heights tax abatement was rushed to potential fruition, including 2 lame duck council representatives. Why?
That is not for me to answer. What I will say is what is fact. So there's a 2-part proposal with regards to the tax exemption or abatement. A CRA, which is a community reinvestment area, that has been approved by the city in terms of the mall being eligible for that, or the development being eligible for that. Any other abatements or exemptions, to my knowledge, have not been approved, and there is a portion, I believe, of one of the types of exemptions that must also have school board approval if it is seeking a total 30-year 100% abatement.
Three-part question. Please clarify which city or community gets the Regal Cinema Theater.
South Euclid.
Number 2, will there be an urgent care located at Bell Oaks development?
I don't know that. That's the developer.
And the final question on that card, it appears that Richmond Heights School District will not benefit as much as South Euclid from the development of this project. Why?
Again, nothing definitive, but the developer, the city will need to negotiate or communicate or do something with each school district. So how each school district's deal, each school district's negotiation, or each school district's communication is handled is yet to be seen. I have no idea where South Euclid is in this situation. What I do know is tonight they're having the exact same kind of meeting we're having. So just know that they too are meeting with their community around their finances.
What are some local examples, for instance, Pinecrest with Orange Schools or Amazon with Warrensville Schools, where the developers and the city have worked together with the schools?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, David, those are two that he didn't work on. But we do know from our legal counsel, because he did work with the Orange schools, and actually, our director of special ed lives in Orange, and she recalls when Pinecrest was going through this stage. What actually ended up happening, there was a 4-component deal. One, the developer gave a donation to the school district up front. 2, there was an agreement that any new taxes, the school district would receive those. So if a levy was ever placed and everyone's taxes rose, the school district would not lose those. 3, the school district, Orange schools, received 25% of what was going to be abatement. So it was not a 100% abatement. They received 25% to have something there. And what was the 4th one? Oh, there was an income tax sharing with the city. Ms. Davies, did I get that right? Now, the one thing I don't know, because Ms. Davies said that actually, it was a ballot issue. It was a ballot issue in the city of Orange. I have no idea how that happens, why that happens, but Ms. Davies often also shared that her house was a house divided. Oh, Warrensville. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Warrensville with Amazon. I do know that. Talk to their superintendent regularly. Amazon built the distribution center. They upfront sponsored several programs in the district, but then they also did not do a 100% abatement, but to the tune of $2 million a year, the school district still receives. So I don't know what percentage of exemption that is, but roughly $2 million a year the Warrensville schools get for that Amazon development.
So in general, the benefits, if you go back to that one slide where I put in some of the key components to making a community attractive for the future, the biggest benefit of all is that something like this project will continue to make Richmond Heights very attractive and appealing to people in the future. It's hard to quantify that benefit in terms of dollars, but I can tell you, as a piece of the pie in order to change the future for this community, that's an instrumental piece of the pie. And it's hard, and I just don't necessarily want to focus on, is the city going to get money in income taxes or who in property taxes, because those really become inconsequential to the fact that you're moving in large steps toward becoming a community overall that will be a very nice community for the future. So I would say the benefit is substantial to everyone in this room and every homeowner in this community.
How does our property tax dollars play into vouchers?
Okay. All right, in preparation for that question, you received a folder, so you're going to get your first handout, and I'll explain it, but you'll have it to take home and digest. It starts like this. The state of Ohio says that we will pay every school district $6,020 for a typical student getting a typical education in a typical district. And that's key because we know not all students are typical. We have students with special needs that require more than the $6,000. But the state has dubbed 60/20 as the amount that they will pay per pupil. The handout clearly shows that at the top. However, the next part indicates that the state has a formula called state share. Each school district receives a state share index. This formula then says, based on the wealth of your property tax valuation, juxtaposed or compared to the size of your school district, we come up with a percentage of that $6,020 that we're actually going to give you. That's part of the cornerstone of the unconstitutionality of school funding in Ohio, is that it's based on property tax valuations. So guess what? We do not receive $6,020 for a typical student in our district. We receive $1,635 because Richmond Heights is perceived as a wealthy community based on its property valuation, in contrast to such a small school district. Now, if the school district had 10,000 kids, we would probably be at 99%, we would get all state money. So how does that play into vouchers? The bottom part of the sheet,
Again, vouchers are $46.50 for K through 8 students and $6,000 for 9 through 12 students. You can do the math, but it's done for you on the sheet. $4,365 remains unfunded from the state. If you were to take $6,000 minus the $1,635 that we get, there's a balance of $4,365. Guess who pays the $4,365? You do. Your public tax dollars go to Hawkins, St. Ed, Benedictine, VA St. Joe, US, or any other private or parochial school that accepts vouchers. 75% of vouchers are funded by your local public tax dollars. That's the battle down in Columbus now. Part of what legislators are pushing for is fund vouchers totally out of a state fund and not take it as a direct withdrawal from school districts. Okay. That's one handout, you'll get others. Who stands to benefit, and we've kind of talked about this, from Bell Oaks City or schools? Will the school get any tax abatement? And then the final part of that question is, what is the feedback about the Bell Oaks project in the South Euclid-Lyndhurst School District? So I think David clearly talked about the benefit can be a win-win-win. I always say a try-win. Some wins have a capital W, some don't. But everyone can benefit. If you look at, let's use Warrensville and Amazon. So they didn't get all of the multiple millions of dollars that they would have gotten had there been no abatement. But that $2 million was a welcome to their budget. But the only difference between this project and Warrensville is that Amazon didn't bring extra students that they then have to serve. That's the difference. The last part talked about South Euclid. I had one conversation with the superintendent, and quite frankly, she said, I'm not even there yet. I'm thinking about the levy that we have on the ballot right now. South Euclid-Lyndhurst has a ballot issue for next month, and that was put on the ballot before there was conversation around the potentiality of Bell Oaks bringing over 400 apartments. What does that mean to them as a school district? So that's something they'll have to grapple with. If the levy passes, you have residents that say, we just agreed to increase our taxes. How dare you give an abatement to a developer? I don't know, but I do know that the superintendent said we're not even there yet. And only because we don't have a ballot issue pending is why we're having this conversation. If the Deal Point deal dies, does the school have enough revenue to A, build the new school, B, make repairs to elementary, C, have operating funds? As promised with levy/bond issue, will it be paused? Okay. Absolutely not. The school that's being built was passed in 2017. That was a combination levy. That is totally different from operations. Now, 2017, this community stood behind the schools. You passed a combination levy to build the 21st Century Community Learning Center. It will be built. It is opening in January. Now, operating going forward will depend on what we have to do. If we get an influx of kids, if we continue to lose funds through vouchers, Cooper is our treasurer. He's going to have to put out that tentative budget, and he's going to have to answer to the state and say, we're in a shortfall, our 5-year forecast is in a deficit. We have to go back to the community to ask that they raise taxes. That's why this conversation is so critical. But that building will be built, it will be open. We have those funds. I only have a few more. Swage Lock is in Highland Heights, and it employs machinists, engineers, and design and manufacturing engineers. Are there plans to engage them to host a program for our students to learn about careers in machining/engineering? There is a national shortage of machinists, which is a six-figure income potential after 4 to 5 years. Absolutely. So part of my regret is that tonight's traditional State of the District could not showcase all of those wonderful things we're doing. We have a very viable aviation and manufacturing career pathway, thanks to a $700,000 grant that my team and I wrote and we received. We have engaged with a company called Magnet, and I would be remiss if I try, let's see, Manufacturing and Growth Network. And through Magnet, we have students that will be interning at Component Repair Technologies in Mentor. We have a partnership developing with Swagelock, with Lincoln Electric, and with other manufacturing companies, because we are clear, there are six-figure salaries that can be had in manufacturing. With this grant, we were able to outfit a total maker space. Right now, it's in the bottom of our building, our current building, but the new building has a maker space totally designed where our students are lathe cutting, vinyl cutting, their media, digital media, they're creating their own news network. We have flight simulators, as the video showed. But yes, we are addressing the manufacturing deficits, if you will. How many workers or jobs will come to the Richmond Heights school side of the project? Okay, so while we can't stand here and say the exact numbers, what we do know is that there was a projection of over 500, I think it was on this card, benefits to the city, over 500 potential jobs. Based on what we displayed on the screen, the Richmond Heights side with the 8 or 9 apartment buildings and the 2 8,000 square feet of retail, we can high estimate and guess that 50, 60 jobs between whatever types of restaurants or boutique shops that would hold, and then whoever would work in the management offices. But all of the retail, that's why it was important that I went over that map. Most of the retail and the commercial lies on the South Euclid School District side. Was that about right? Okay. And this is the last one. So what do you want, or what would you like the community to do? Okay, perfect segue. Team, there's a half sheet that says call to action. If we could pass out the half sheet, what that is indicating is that right now, while our legislators are hot and heavy in debate around all of these unintended consequences, I truly believe they're unintended, that are affecting our district every which way. Senator Yuko, we've met with him in collaboration with the Cleveland Heights Coalition for Public Schools, and he's clear about our story. Kent Smith, who had his town hall here a few months ago, he's clear about these unintended consequences. So the half sheet that you're receiving is entitled A Call to Action. It lists the phone number and email for every legislator that's relevant and pertinent to our situation. And I will say today, tonight, while they're back and forth this week, a simple email, a simple voice message. When I talked to the governor's office 2 weeks ago, he absolutely could not and did not believe that we were experiencing our eligibility for priority points on some grants. Our school district is labeled as a suburban school district. There are typologies, and this is Education Ease. But a suburban school district typology means that you're a small district and you have low poverty. I said, that's not us. We're a small school district, but we have close to 70% free and reduced lunch. So that typology of being a suburban district negates us from getting priority points on an application for a 21st century community grant. And when I explained that to the governor's office, they said, oh my. Then I went on to explain how our state share, by only giving us $1,635 out of the due $6,000, is killing us because we're turning around having to pay out $6,000 and $4,650 for vouchers. He said, your state share is awfully low. Absolutely. Because our state share is so low and we're viewed in this category with other wealthy districts, we weren't able to use state funding to build that new building.
We kept hearing the question, Euclid had 70% funded by the state, and East Cleveland had 99%. Why didn't, our index for the OFCC at the time we were looking at that building was 5%. 5%. A nickel for every dollar. And it was just determined by our architect, our construction company, our legal advisor, that the mandate that you have to go through, it was not worth that nickel. I think we're up to 7% now. Along with that, our district is capped. You've heard this last year at the State of the Schools. Our treasurer talked extensively. Well, what's a gains cap? There are 600 some odd districts in the state. If the state funded every district based on their enrollment, there would not be enough money. So there's a formula where some districts are capped, some districts are on the guarantee, and some districts are truly funded based on their enrollment. I don't know the formula that gets you in the cap, but I can imagine, because I've looked at the other districts that are in there, Upper Arlington, Olentangy, who else could be capped? Brooklyn, our neighbor Brooklyn is capped. We fight the same battle. And when we look at what you have districts that have a healthy tax valuation, but for most intents and purposes, they also have an exploding population. So in Upper Arlington or in Olentangy, around Columbus, wealthy communities, growing population. The cap says, we're only going to give you a percentage of what you should get because you have enough wealth to take care of your own. Well, we don't have the exploding population, but with what we do have, we're still capped at 57%. That's 57% of what by right is due our district. We're capped. So is Brooklyn. Again, small districts with healthy valuations. Those are the unique situations that Mr. Conley was referring to. So when you look at the gains cap, when you look at vouchers, when you look at the state share index, I used to call my story the perfect storm, but I won't call it the perfect storm. I will call it our unique situations. I learned that tonight. They are unique situations, and they can change. We've seen laws overturned in the midnight hour, but it takes a call to action. It took me talking to DeWine's office, Governor DeWine's office, and if you only knew how I got his ear, it would amaze you. But I got that letter to him in his car, in a limo, as he was going somewhere else, and he read it. And he passed it on to his analysts and to 15 other people in his office and said, this can't be true. We got a call, and we had a 2-hour conversation, the treasurer and myself, with his office. And they took down everything we said and said, we're going to be meeting on this. So first call to action, Governor DeWine. He's familiar with our district, not only from speaking to me, but because Senator Yuko is a resident of this district.
It says sanitation is now included in our property taxes. Does tax abatement mean no sanitation costs for apartments, or would the tax change?
Not my wheelhouse. Not my wheelhouse.
So I'm just going to say what I know from the county and what I...
That's the treasurer, for those that didn't know. Cooper Martin, treasurer.
When you think about sanitation, those are special assessments for the city, so they're not really taxes. They're a determined amount for the services you receive. So they're not in the calculation, they're special assessments. And I'm happy to provide more information on that.
The sanitation is, would be handled by the private hauler under contract with it. So any of we have homeowners associations in the city, they handle their own rubbish. I don't know if that helps. And it's the same with the apartments, they handle their own rubbish. We don't handle it. Any of the apartments. Everybody hear that, or did I?
To the point.
On the sanitation, all the apartments and a lot of the homeowners associations cover their own costs of the trash pickup. I'll also add, I guess, just so everybody kind of understands, I'm a member of the Mayors and Managers Association of Cuyahoga County. So 58 of the communities, municipalities had a letter sent down to the legislators this last week, I guess it was, encouraging them to at least think about what they're doing with this. And so I'm hoping at least those 58 communities had an effect on at least delaying this for a couple months to have them review the situation a little closer. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Connolly would like the last word. 2 cards came up and they actually say the same thing. What do we do or say when we reach out with our call to action? On the reverse of that half sheet are just bulleted points. And those are bulleted points that at some point I've said, our board has said, we've drafted resolutions about, in your own voice, from your own heart, whichever bullet point touches you, that's what you can include. This one, how many charter schools do we fund? Charter schools, we send checks, or actually peel-offs go to roughly, how many charters?
Probably 135.
Students or actual charter schools? Yeah.
Yeah, it's harder to quantify.
Okay. Yeah, there are quite a few charter schools, but be clear that charter schools are public schools, and that's a different scenario from vouchers. Vouchers are private schools. That's your Hawken, your US, and I have no problem with those schools, but public dollars. And that was it. So, David Conley, with our final word.
I just want to thank everybody for letting me come back in and bug you. I also just want to sort of leave you with one passing thought going forward. I never in a million years, after the first few meetings I came here, would have imagined seeing what I'm seeing today. In a very short period of time, we've got a new school coming out of the ground and what looks to be a beautiful development for this community. And I know it's easy to get pulled into the negative area of wanting to fight and bicker, but you're making progress in a really short period of time, and it's proof that your commitment is working. Yes, there are going to be rough patches, and yes, there are going to be disagreements, but promise yourselves to keep working to resolve things. Promise yourselves to understand everyone's situation honestly and fairly, and then work to resolve those. Because if you keep it up, this town is going to be one heck of a town, and I can say I remember when. So thank you for having me out. You guys have a good night, okay?
So, David, as you go to get on the road, I would be remiss if I did not ask my board to stand, because the board entrusts me to do a lot, and I could have stood here and I could have said whatever I needed to say, but board members that are here, and because you've come in and sat in different places, I want to honor you and acknowledge you. Please stand, and just thank you for allowing me to convince David to come up. So as you leave tonight, before you go, because my staff is passing out 2 other pieces, there's really a bifurcated or 2-pronged approach that I need for the call to action. One is with legislators in Columbus. The other is around our local strategic plan and development. You're getting 2 flyers. Hopefully one you should have received in the mail or will be receiving this trifold shortly. It lists the accomplishments of our first strategic plan, which ends this school year. And we met every major strategic plan, even the new building. You have to understand, in 2015, a steering committee sat down and said, we've got to have a new school. And that steering committee had community members on it. And if anyone here was on the initial strategic planning steering committee, could you stand if you can or wave your hand? Because I do see members from 2015. And I thank you. And the call to action is out again for our 2.0 version. Everyone is invited to serve on this strategic plan steering committee. You're receiving all of the dates. Please email me if you want to serve. It's actually a month-and-a-half-long process, 1 to 2 meetings, because there will be several focus meetings. So please note the accomplishments. And finally, there is a live survey because, of course, the 100 some odd people that are here don't represent all 10,000 residents. Please tell people there's a live survey that they can go on to take so that we can get their input and feedback as well. So those are the last two documents. And with that, oh, the last question that came up, what must occur in order for the unique characteristics of the school situation to be fully analyzed? It's legislation. When I talked to the governor, I will tell you how bold I am. I said, I want an executive order. He chuckled, his analyst, Dustin chuckled. He said, executive orders don't work like that. But what we can do is work with the legislators, whether it's someone proposing an amendment, because we all know Chagrin Falls almost had theirs. In case you didn't follow, anybody know what happened in Chagrin Falls? They almost had the amendment that they didn't have to pay the public school taxes because they didn't use the public schools in Orange. And until it got public wheels on it or feet, it took off and did not go through. So anything is possible, but it takes a call to action. So that's what we're asking for. Okay. David, this one might be for you. The economic development project benefits all. The idea of possible increase of property tax as a result of this project doesn't sound like a benefit to all. If 100% abatement is not a done deal, can we go back to the drawing board, renegotiate, perhaps? Well, no negotiations have happened, so we're not there yet, okay? All right, given the agreement made many years ago giving South Euclid Lyndhurst funds from property in Richmond Heights, does this agreement last a lifetime? And the answer to that is it lasts a lifetime until it's changed. Again, there is a law that says you can do territory transfers, and it requires the voice of the electorate, which are the residents. So there is a process, and it is a process that I initially investigated within my first 2 years of being here, and it is an extensive process, but it can be done. It takes the agreement of both the Richmond Heights School Board and the South Euclid School Board in terms of not creating undue stress on one or the other. At the time of the conversation with South Euclid, there were 50 students that lived in Richmond Heights that went to South Euclid schools, and that was back in 2018. So that can be resurrected. Okay, so on that, I would like to thank everyone for coming out. I'll stick around. I would ask if you would allow David to get on the road because he's got to drive to Columbus, and we can't thank you enough for driving free of charge through the storm because you say you love this city. All right. Okay. Now, if there are any presidents of HOAs or if there are any organizations, David has provided 20 copies of his PowerPoint so that you can go back and present it to your HOA. I have those copies. Thank you. Take food. Elected officials, we all thank you, we honor you, and we go forward.